So, this is lecture number 14 on dams and development in modern India. So, if you remember the previous lecture on colonial hydrology. So, we ended the previous lecture on colonial hydrology by saying that in order to understand multi-purpose river valley development projects, we need to contextualize it within the larger historical processes of hydraulic interventions in South Asia. So, my argument is that multipurpose river valley development projects should be understood as that kind of a continued colonial legacy so far as water management or hydraulic interventions in South Asia is concerned. So, I want to contextualize it within the larger processes of western technological interventions on the rivers of South Asia. We need to understand the global context as well, which is very important to understand multipurpose river valley development projects, because this was the era of decolonization. This was the era of decolonization and development. So, I will elaborate on the same. So, it was the era of decolonization and the implementation of the development discourse. We have very fine and sophisticated literature on the same. Definitely I would like to cite Arturo Escobar and his book called Encountering Development, which came out in 1995, and also a very interesting coverage by Catherine Caulfield, who is a journalist, and her book called The Master of Illusion on the development projects implemented by the development agencies like the World Bank. So, what I want to say is that during this era of decolonization, there was a whole lot of anxiety and apprehension among the global players. So, the world was to a great extent divided into the so called first world and third world, or the later the developed and the underdeveloped, and little later developed and developing nations. So, what happened is that large scale development projects and infrastructures were implemented in the decolonized countries, in the decolonized nations, and the United States and the transnational corporations, and quote unquote the unholy trinity, that is the World Bank, the IMF and also the WTO. These organizations were provided with the megalomaniac role of implementing development in the so called underdeveloped, the so called decolonized nations of the global south. So, not only dams, but also agricultural modernization or urbanization, and most importantly construction of dams should be contextualized within the larger historical and political processes of decolonization and implementation of the development discourse on the global south by the so called first world countries. Now, so far as specific history of multipurpose river valley development projects are concerned, we have to keep in mind that the global model was engineered in the United States, and with the establishment of the Tennessee Valley Authority in the 1930s. And James Scott, who is the author of fascinating treatises including the art of not being governed or seeing like a state. So, James Scott pointed out that this Tennessee Valley Authority or this particular project can be looked into as a module of high modernism, which was pre-packaged to get replicated in other parts of the globe, more importantly the decolonizing quote unquote, or the decolonized quote unquote underdeveloped parts of the world. So, so that was the global context when the Tennessee Valley Authority was established, and series of dams were constructed on the Tennessee River and its tributaries. Now, if we look into the specific national context, the Indian context, we will see that in 1943 there was a massive flood in the Damodar river. So, this was a massive Damodar flood of 1943, which generated lot of worries and anxieties among the engineers and technocrats and planners and the water experts in India. And the 10-member Damodar Flood Inquiry Committee was formed to come up with solutions and recommendations relating to the problem of massive floods. And Meghnad Saha, he was playing a pioneering role in the team. He pointed out and he recommended that the replication of Tennessee Valley Authority within the Indian context was extremely urgent. So, that legitimized the implementation of the Tennessee Valley discourse or the Tennessee Valley ideology, and also to a great extent the technical parameters or technical nitty-gritties of the Tennessee Valley within the context of South Asia and more specifically India. So, in 1945, that is just before our independence, the Central Waterways Irrigation and Navigation Commission CWINC was formed, and 1950s, 60s, 70s there was whole lot of passion and optimism surrounding the building of India's mega dams. So, Swine, the reference is there at the end. So, Swine Swine says that there was a kind of dam building spree in these 3 decades between across 50s, 60s and 70s, and this optimism and passion is very much reflected in what Nehru said or what Nehru pointed out during the inauguration of the Nagarjuna Sagar project in the 1950s, more specifically 1955. So, Nehru says, when I lay the foundation stone here of this Nagarjuna Sagar, to me it is a sacred ceremony. So, see how sacredness, the element of sacredness was also included in this multi-purpose river valley development schemes or projects. And so, sacredness, but you will see that the idea of sacredness, it became more concretized when Nehru says that these are the temples of modern India. So, this is the foundation of the temple of humanity of India, a symbol of new temples that we are building all over India. So, this quote is extremely important, which captures the pride, the glory, the passion, the optimism and all these positive emotions that were associated with the phase or with this particular initiative of the dam construction in India. So, it was a moment of national glory, a moment of national pride, which is extreme, which is totally manifested and reflected in the argument that Nehru said, or in the comment that Nehru made during the inauguration of Nagarjuna Sagar project. So, as I mentioned that the era of the 50s, 60s, 70s, almost all the rivers, big rivers and small rivers visualize the implementation of interventions, big dams, barrages, etc. On them. And so, this included the construction of for example, the Hirakud Dam. So, Hirakud Dam, I am emphasizing it because it is the longest dam in the world. So, it included the the Nagarjuna Sagar project or the Nagarjuna Sagar Dam, which is also one of the largest dams in the world, and also the Bhakra Dam, which is again one of the highest concrete gravity dam in the world. So, all these big dams on rivers like Satluj, like Krishna, like Mahanadi, like Godavari, Kaveri. So, all these rivers visualize the implementation of big dams and barrage networks on them across the 50s, 60s, 70s, that is the immediate post-independent period. Now, so with development, of course, came the price of development. This is what we need to understand. And as a social scientist, of course, I am going to highlight on the price of development more than the development than the technical components of development itself. So, for us there are two things which become very remain very important. So, one is understanding technological choices as or understanding networks or technological choices or processes as historical solutions to specific construction of problem. So, for us understanding the broader political and historical context becomes very important, that why a particular project was implemented or was perceived during a particular point of time. So, what were the political economic logic, or what were the political economic imperatives that provoked the implementation of that particular project during that particular point of time. So, this becomes important for a social scientist to understand a lot. This is one. And the second thing is that we are also very much concerned about the about what happens during the post implementation period. So, with dams or with development is very much associated the price of development, which we'll see that how it generated whole lot of ecological and social implications, more importantly social implications in the form of displacement. So, this particular phrase called the price of development, I am bringing it from or I am using it from Walter Fernandez, who is another very important water expert. So, he wrote a paper in 1993 which was published in the Seminar, and the title of the article itself is the price of development. So, I am using this that with dams or this kind of multi-purpose river development projects and schemes came the price of development in the form of submergence of vast areas of forests, agricultural lands, and not only this ecological implications or impacts, but also social impacts like massive population displacement. So, according to data like if we go through Pranchpai's article, we find that between 1951 and 1985 in these decades around 21 million people were displaced. So, this was the cost of social cost of dam construction in India. And of course, the rehabilitation packages were provided. There were a complex resettlement process. There are stories of complex stories of resettlement processes, but again, like rehabilitation or relocation packages, resettlement processes were inadequate, limited, and to a great extent unsuccessful. So, there are several articles, book chapters and reports that bring out the limitedness or that bring out the inadequacy of these resettlement or relocation packages. But one thing that has to be kept in mind is that during the 1950s and 60s or for that matter the early 70s as well, we do not find much significant protest against construction of dams, though there were displacement, because displacement from the time when dams were constructed or even since the pre-implementation phase, lands were acquired, lands were annexed and people were displaced. So, from the very beginning dam construction actually also is associated with the process of displacement, but one needs to keep in mind that during the initial years or during the initial decades there were no significant protests, because the whole country was to a great extent optimistic towards this kind of massive big infrastructural projects, because it was thought upon that big would be beautiful and India's immediate economic objectives or India's immediate economic objectives could be accomplished through the construction of dam. So, it was very important, it was imperative for a decolonized nation like India to make space for the for the multi-purpose development projects and schemes. So, there were no significant protests. There were few protests, but those were too weak and they were dismissed at the outset. So, we can remember like how even Nehru, he tried to dismiss the claims made by the socialist leader like Ram Manohar Lohia, who were extremely who were criticizing these river valley schemes and dam construction. So, it was a general understanding that local interests for the time being had to be sacrificed at national cost. So, this was the situation during 50s and 60s. But if we go through some write ups and reports, we find out that the cost of displacement were however huge from the very beginning itself. So, Chandok and Ghosh writes in their 1995 paper that the very few people whose wealth and welfare, you have to take note of these two keywords, both wealth and welfare. So, the very few the very people whose wealth and welfare the projects were supposed to enhance and now wash off economically and demoralize socially. So, this is the environmental impact. So, these were the environmental impact and social impact of dam, and you can understand that during that time, during the initial decades of the formulation of these projects, no detailed EIA or that is environmental impact assessments were conducted, and SIA, that is social impact assessment, during that time it was not it was not in vogue at all. So, of course, the costs of constructions during the pre-implementation period, during the implementation period, and also during the post-implementation period were severe and huge. Now, we come to late 1970s, and late 1970s is the era of anti-dam resistance. So, the initial decade of no resistance or very weak and timid resistance was replaced by the era of strong anti-dam resistance since the 1970s, because now protests became severe against these strong socio-ecological implications of dam construction, that included, as we had learned, deforestation, water logging, downstream water shortages, siltation, salinization, whatnot, and of course, social costs and social problems like displacement and inadequate rehabilitation schemes. So, now what I will do is that we will look into some of these very significant and prominent and important anti-dam resistance that shook not only the nation, but also drew lot of international attention, and the consequences varied from the cancellation or abandonment of project to partial implementation of project to no cancellation, no abandonment, even not even minor modification in those projects at all. So, there were the consequences had varied, the consequences had been different, but to a great extent the nature of this anti-dam resistance had been we find some stark similarities so far as the nature and pattern of the anti-dam resistances are concerned, that started since late 1970s and that is going on till date. So, to begin with, this is the Tehri Dam movement, and it is one of the oldest anti-dam resistant movement in India. You can see the picture of the great Chipko leader Sundarlal Bahuguna, who was also associated with the Tehri Dam movement, because his group and the famous organization called the Tehri Bandh Birodhi Sangharshan Samiti. So, the Tehri Bandh Birodhi Sangharshan Samiti, Sundarlal Bahuguna, they mobilized different other organizations, they mobilized the local people, they mobilized people inhabiting the area, because this dam was supposed to get constructed on of course in Uttaranchal and on river Bhagirathi. And so, this is the site of this was a proposed site of construction, but this movement was successful to a great extent that finally the project was abandoned. So, what I would like you to do is that as it will be very difficult for me to cover all the detailed aspects or components of these very important movements that took place in India since 1970s till today in this 30 minutes or 40 minutes duration lecture. So, I request you to go through the details or the technicalities and also social aspects relating to these anti-dam resistances or anti-dam movements in India. So, another movement, again a very successful movement, unqualified success, and there is a very interesting documentary which you will find in the web, of course, which is called Only an X Away, Only an X Away. So, if you see this documentary, you will be able to understand some of the important aspects or crucial aspects relating to the Silent Valley movement. So, Silent Valley movement, it was, I mean, the protest was against the construction of the Silent Valley hydroelectric project in Kerala. So, the understanding was that this particular dam or this project would actually inflict lot of harm on, you can see the tropical rainforest here. So, it will harm the biological life, it will harm the ecological balance in the tropical rainforest of Kerala. So, the people and mainly the Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad, KSSP, which was otherwise a body that was mainly interested about literature and cultural aspects and all that. So, they took a political take and took a political stance, and they started mobilizing people, they started mobilizing the middle class, but mainly the local people, the marginalized communities whose lives would be affected by this project. So, they mobilized them, and finally the pressure was so huge on the government that this project was also cancelled in 1984. So, and this is known as the anti-dam resistance of the highest profile. So, I do not know, I might be a little bit criticized by people who might counter this connotation, but this is not my coinage, but the experts only, they say that this is the anti-dam resistance of highest profile, not only in India, but of course, it also gained lot of international recognition. We will see the chronology of events, we will see the timeline, and we will understand how, how long, we will understand the duration, because it has a stretch of more than few decades. From the inception of the project since the 1960s. So, when there were a lot of talks that this project or the Sardar Sarovar project will be implemented till today. So, finally 2017, the project has been finally inaugurated, but there is a decadal history of what had happened, like how this project was perceived. So, and the technicalities of the Sardar Sarovar project, and why and how people had resisted against the Sardar Sarovar project, what had been the consequences, the pressure on the government. So, how the government had addressed the needs and interests and the arguments of the protesters, then what had happened, and the long series of events that had occurred since the last few decades. So, it is a big movement, it is an umbrella movement, and it would have been actually just to make a presentation on Narmada Bachao Andolan itself, but that was not possible. So, I have just I am just touching Narmada Bachao Andolan here, and I will ask you to go through the chronology of events, to understand the movement, to learn the pattern of the movement, because this is a movement which we really need to understand. Everyone, the civils, the scientists, the engineers, the social scientists, any citizen of India really need to understand the pattern of the Narmada Bachao movement across the last more than three and a half decades. So, this is the picture of I think you all know Medha Patkar, who is who is the forefront leader of the Narmada Bachao Andolan. Again, I might be criticized, there might be controversy that why I am highlighting only Medha Patkar, because there are many other people who are associated with the Narmada Bachao Andolan, and it is, we all know, people who are trained in history, we know that we should not be actually focusing on one particular leader, because that does injustice to number of subaltern masses who are otherwise involved in big projects or big resistances or big protest movements like that. But anyway, I have kept the image of Medha Patkar because Medha Patkar, of course, she played a leading role in this particular movement, and lot of milestones were achieved under her leadership so far as Narmada Bachao is concerned. And few data, so there is a whole lot of data on Narmada Bachao Andolan, but I must say that these two books are not there in the reference list, but these are additional references. So, one is by Amita Bhaviskar. She has worked on this particular movement. So, the name of the book is In the Belly of a River. So, this is the Narmada river. So, in the belly of a river, you must at least go through the introduction of Amita Bhaviskar's In the Belly of a River, and there is another book by Arundhati Roy. It is called The Algebra of Infinite Justice. So, Arundhati Roy is a very famous personality, lot of controversies surrounding her as well. So, let us not go into that, but definitely I would ask you, provoke you to go through the algebra of infinite justice, and you will be able to understand the scale, gravity of this and intensity, of course, of this particular movement called Narmada Bachao. So, just one or two details I would be sharing with you, then I will just give you a document, share with you a document on the chronology of events between 1961 and the contemporary times 2017, so far as this movement is concerned. So, just one or two detail. So, one thing is that it is a project that comprising three major states of India: Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra and Gujarat. And today also lot of problems and lot of whole lot of hotbed of controversies and heated exchanges are going on across these states so far as water sharing is concerned. So, Gujarat, the farmers, they are complaining about prolonged drought, and they are complaining about water challenges and water severity due to this Sardar Sarovar project. So, this is one. If you go through some of the very popular also, but also very significant journals like Down to Earth, or for that matter some of the articles in EPW, you will get to know like the scenario, farmers protest and farmers allegations and lot of other things that are going on in the field due to the implementation of the Sardar Sarovar project. So, initially when it was conceived, so the experts came out with the finding that it will, if the project is implemented at its full scale, then it will displace not less than 2 million people. So, this was one. So, more than 250 villages will get submerged, and more than like 35,000 hectares of land will get underwater. So, these were the massive implications of the project, but then unfortunately, so there was whole lot of protests, whole lot of resistances which actually started in Gujarat, and then there were protests by grassroots organization and non-governmental organization, civil bodies in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, and all these so all these grassroots organizations and all these civil society organizations which were protesting in Gujarat, MP and Maharashtra, they marched together to form what is known as the Narmada Bachao Andolan or the Narmada Bachao Alliance. And this was so important that it not only pressurized the Indian government, but it drew large scale international attention. So, the Japanese government, even the World Bank became extremely involved in the nitty-gritties of the project. So, I will not go beyond this, but it will be your task now to go through the chronology of events. Everything is there. This is the historical timeline. time scale about the projects. You please go through the entire timeline and try to learn like what happened, which year. I mean, not year by year depiction of events is very important, but what is important is that how the movement started, what happened at the middle, how the state reacted, how the state addressed the the points raised and the arguments raised by the protesters, and then finally what happened. So, these are the things which we really need to learn about the Narmada Bachao Andolan. And there are a lot of works on this. I can also remember Patrick McCulley's work, Mamita Bhaviskar, Arundhati Roy, many others. So, please go through some of the works about Narmada Bachao Andolan. Yes, so I highlighted the Tehri Dam resistance, I highlighted the Silent Valley movement, I talked about Narmada Bachao Andolan, but there are many other small scale movements as well. So, I do not think small scale would be an appropriate term to categorize this or classify these movements as, but we can say that these are some movements which are to a great extent underexplored, but these are also fascinating movements which put a lot of pressure on the state government and also the national government, and some projects were compelled to get annulled and abandoned. So, these are some of the examples, like the Chandi Prasad Bhatt, CP Bhatt, who was again associated with this Chipko movement. He protested, he and his group team members, they protested against the construction of the Vishnu Prayag Dam on the Alokananda river. Then there was a movement by the farmers and the tribals against the construction of the Koelkaro dams in Jharkhand. So, the farmers and agricultural laborers of Tamil Nadu, they protested against the Pundi Dam and Betti Dam. This is another success story where the farmers of Karnataka, they protested against the implementation of Betti Dam, and finally the project had to be cancelled. So, the fight is still on. It is a constant fight between the state and the people, with so many other stakeholders in between. Always it is not a linear story, but to a great extent, I mean, there are heavily loaded power equations and politics relating to multi-purpose river valley development projects and schemes. Like some of my other presentation here also, I would like to highlight that what is the role of social sciences so far as understanding dams are concerned. So, the role of social scientists or the role of history, and these I will emphasize time and again and keep on asserting, because I very much feel that the engineers and the the technicians, they really need to understand these social science components, because if they want to come up with if they want to come up with a technical design for a dam, they need to consider very crucial and important aspects of environmental impact assessment or social impact assessment and all these other things that are so very important into the pre-implementation, implementation and post-implementation phases. So, what I would like to highlight is that we not only need to concentrate on the technical component, but we also need to highlight on, we also need to understand the larger historical and political processes that had made way to the implementation of these kind of projects. So, the fight is on, and I will say the stories are very complex, and multi-purpose river valley developments projects actually embed lot of complexities, because these complexities and challenges, these are not only restricted and limited to the local or national scale, but they transcend the local and national scale and include and consist of transnational geopolitical complexities. Now, if you just take a look into the picture, you will see that this is the Ganges river. I am sorry, the picture is not that clear maybe, but I think you can read you can read the details that are there. So, this is a snapshot that shows the different major infrastructural interventions on the river Ganges from upstream to downstream. and we all know that how downstream areas, how downstream regions and countries, they actually to a great extent are affected by large scale infrastructural interventions. So what I want to highlight is that it is not only a national affair, but it is also a transnational affair involving geopolitical equations and involving geopolitical complexities, where marginalized vulnerable people across national boundaries, they keep suffering. This will become clear when I will proceed on to the next lecture, and we will do a case study from taking into consideration these aspects that I had covered in this particular lecture. So, the case study would be on the Farakka barrage project, where I will be covering the technical details, but also the social impact and the environmental impact of the construction of Farakka barrage on the people of West Bengal, more specifically the upstream and the downstream districts, and it will become clear to us that how how the people suffer, what are the massive and severe socio-ecological costs of big scale, large scale intervention like this. So, these are some of the references that we were talking about. So, we talked about Catherine Caulfield. You need to go through Masters of Illusion and Escobar for understanding the development discourse that was imposed on the decolonized nation in the immediate during the 1940s, during the immediate post World War II scenario. Then there are some references on the grassroots movements and the consequences of dam construction so far as displacement and resettlement are concerned. And yeah, so some reports. Yes, that is it. Thank you.